This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I am Andrew Savage.
I'm Nancy Richards, and happy birthday, Andrew Savage.
Oh, thank you. I always have something cloudy hanging over my birthday. When I was a kid, it was blizzards and snowstorms. The last few years it's been pandemics, attempted coup, and now state-sanctioned murders. And so, uh, but overall, it was a pretty decent birthday on a personal level, not, in the context of what's happening in the world, which we'll all get into. But we have an excellent guest for you
Yes,
today
we
on
do.
today's show. Shaun White, our resident former Republican convert.
I'm glad you clarified.
I did, yeah. Well, it's a former Republican convert because and usually one of the places I go when I want to dip my toe into the insane pond that is the right, I go to to your pages because usually the MAGA faithful swarm your posts. Like Nancy has that too,
Oh,
but
yeah, I
yeah,
do. Oh my
yeah.
God, yeah.
Nancy does too, but Nancy, you have like the cantankerous Boomer Rube demo for the MAGAs. Like he's got like the he's Sean's got like the toxic, bro male masculinity
Oh,
wing
have
of
you
it.
seen the bros fight on my site? Oh my God. It's like there's a few people that come out of the woodwork like, oh, bro fight, and they're just on there. So it's hilarious. I walk away and I come back like 2 days later and they're still at it. So it's fun. So it's like I
It's
feel
all
like I leave something and then they and then
it's always a good time, but like because of the background that's both rural and military, you often get that sort of hard right wing right wing allegiance. So yeah, I tend to, and I encourage discussion and dialogue among people who disagree.
and
Yeah.
we have Staten Island, so I went to school with a lot of people that grew up to be very conservative, so on Staten Island. So it's interesting. I was just thinking about this. We have an allegiance to our friends in high school. Like there's a friend of mine from high school that I personally haven't seen since high school, and they argue with me on Facebook. And for some reason, I'm like, oh, just let them go, like, unfriend them. But there's something about high school friends I just can't unfriend. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's part of your formative experiences,
Yeah, I guess so.
just kind of coming up. So, you're kind of so it's you feel weird
And
doing
it
it a
tends to
little
be
bit.
these people that come onto my Facebook group.
Yeah, they have this. You have, like I said, you have, a bunch of cantankerous boomer rubes. Like,
Well,
But
thank you for
thank you both for
joining us,
having me.
Shaun. So it's good to have you.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you both.
I originally I've been talking to Shaun for a couple of weeks now about coming on, and I wanted to talk initially about like the MAGA infighting and the Civil War that's happening and where we think the party is going to go post-Trump, because Trump seems to be the unifying figure for a lot of these people. And I think once he's out of the picture one way or another, I think it's going to fall apart in some ways. But we've had so much happen since. And obviously, yesterday we had the horrific murder of Renee Good, who was driving her car away from ICE agents, no matter what the people in charge say. She was driving away from them. She was not driving toward them as a way of committing vehicular assault. She was driving away from them, and an ICE agent shot and killed her. And I wanted to get your reaction, Nancy, and then I want Shaun to jump into on this.
well, my reaction is I'm disgusted. It's appalling. Like I I saw a video I don't think I was supposed to see. I saw her.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Um,
She was slumped over by the wheel.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, this is footage. Um, and so that it became, it's like, wow. And it, it was horrible. I mean, I wasn't surprised. And then the last couple of days, like I I listened to Dan Abrams today. I've listened to a lot of like moderate media because I know what the left's saying, in regards to this. And I thought the response from the Minnesota governor was really good. I love the response from the mayor of
Get the
yeah,
fuck
get
out
the
of
fuck.
Minneapolis. And well, the best was the sign language interpreter when she,
I didn't see that. That was she actually went like this. Oh,
yes.
that's great. I have to if there's a photo of that, you have to send that to me.
Oh, I will. I have it.
But here is, I also reminded me of someone like me because, I went through ice training and, here we are kind of watching, we're just watching from the sidelines, kind of giving out warnings. And this woman was in a car, just monitoring what was going on and drove away. And that officer shot her. Like, I remember when I first saw the bullet hole. I saw the bullet hole before I saw the footage. Um, and I was like, oh my God, he shot her from point blank right in the front. And I was like, how did that? And then I saw the footage, but he also shot her from the side. Um, and I was listening. There was a police captain that does a lot of comment on on ABC, and he said that the real questionable thing is his shots 2 and 3. That's what he's going to have to answer to. Well, he may not have to answer to it because Christy Nome is running the investigation. Um, but he was talking a lot about training, and he said a few things that officer did. First of all, he was standing in front of the car, which he never should have done, or the back. And this came from an NYPD person. Um, and um and so and how Christy Nome and the federal government have kind of covered up and twisted the events of, you listen to them, like they say that she ran him over, which I mean, you watch the video, you have eyes. Um
Oh, it's
and
complete gaslighting. I mean, she's driving away from them.
Right. And so you can see this and how they twist it. They say that she was a paid left,
Agitator.
agitator, that she was following him. But when she was probed on Channel 7 tonight by a local reporter, because she's in New York tonight, um, they were asking for specifics about because she said that this woman was following them around all day. And so the woman asked for a timeline, the reporter, and she says, "Oh, we'll be giving that to you." It's like, and I just sat there going, "No, you're not. You're not going to
Yeah.
give any timeline. You don't have a timeline. You just
Yeah.
said that." So, um, I also think that we should let this investigation take its toll. Um, we saw what we saw on video. There's plenty of video. I thought the governor of Minnesota did a great job at saying, look, we as Minnesotans, and I have some friends from Minnesota, and that's a liberal state, and they're very good at it. And Tim Walz was like, we have a right to protest, but we have to, do it peacefully. He thought about, the National Guard and how these are our neighbors, um, and I thought they did a very good job at um, you know, kind of talking down what's going to probably happen next.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody wants an escalation. I don't think anybody wants, uh, a situation where we're giving Trump and his administration exactly what they want, which is a Reichstag fire moment to use maximal force on protesters. And we know that Trump has always wanted to do that. He said his biggest regret from term one was that he wasn't more aggressive on protesters because he let people like Esper talk him out of it with the George Floyd protesters. Shaun, what was your reaction to all of this? What is your reaction to seeing members of your former party try to spin this or do the usual, well, she should have just done what she was told, or she was a domestic terrorist, or and just the gaslighting that's taken place around this?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's very on brand for how the party has gone. Um, but
Absolutely.
I mean, to Nancy's point, I sort of get nostalgic for the days where we'd sort of not just obviously you see video in the in the public domain, you're going to draw your own conclusions. But at least from the days when there was an Oval Office who was like, we have an ongoing investigation and we're going to take us where the facts ultimately lead us. And there's that sort of restraint that doesn't attempt to sort of stoke the already growing rift between the your fellow countrymen. So I think part of it was just despair over the fact that Christy Gnome's rushing to the scene to brand this poor woman a domestic terrorist.
Terrorist. Yep.
um i I think it would be shocking if we didn't have a 10-year long resume of this exact thing. And I think he's sort of become, he in the sense of Trump has become like the figurehead for the worst aspects of our own online persona, where there is that rush to judge, that rush to
Mhm.
label. And the media at this point isn't about getting things right, it's about getting it first. And I
Yeah.
think that knee-jerk response is part and parcel to how he's governed. And I think in it, you're seeing a lot of the people that support him use the FAFO phrase, right? Uh,
Mhm.
um, the F around and find out. And that sort of loss of humanity, not just loss of humanity, it's so hypocritical when you compare it against the reaction with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
The loss of humanity, and at least viewing this individual as a person who, my understanding was, she had lost her husband some years earlier and had a 6-year-old daughter who is now an orphan.
Mhm.
So irrespective of the fact of how she died, whether or not you categorize it as murder or manslaughter, or there's whether or not there was a reasonable use of deadly force, those are solid legal arguments that will be made in due time and due course with the ongoing investigations. But at least taking a step back and observing the humanity that some unarmed woman ultimately lost her life, that to me is disgusting and irredeemable as far as I'm concerned. I did have when I, on 9/11, if you went to Naval Air Station, Patuxent River, and checked the logs, I was actually the gate sentry that was on duty that day. I was augmented auxiliary security force, so I had uh, pretty extensive deadly force training. It was a little different because the military was given uh, use of deadly force in the context of state secrets in addition. So it was a little broader than what civilians receive. And because of the fact that you're waving traffic carrying a sidearm at the gate, you have interactions with vehicles regularly. Um, and there were certainly instances where, in the fog of 9/11, where, there were questionable calls with respect to, vehicles coming too close, questions of safety. So when I looked at the video, I think the first thing that came to my mind is he's on the left-hand side of the vehicle. And this comes from a legal perspective as well, because in order to utilize deadly force, you have to have two elements really for law enforcement. You have to have a reasonable apprehension or fear for your own safety, or a reasonable fear for the safety of others. So the fact that he was literally the last officer to the right from the vantage point of the driver in the vehicle, and he was at that point on the left hand side of the vehicle, I thought was dubious. And that was when he fired the first shot. The fact that there were two additional, um, you know, I've heard from some of my friends that you had mentioned earlier that they're trained to fire in 3-round bursts. But I think my knee jerk reaction was, after seeing the headline for the last 2 to 3 months in legal circles about how federal law enforcement have been whittled down from 13 weeks of training to 6 weeks of training, and some of them are not even vetted by the time they get to the academy. Uh, Particularly with respect to the fact that ICE has bolstered its numbers. I think they were at 10,000, now they're at 22. Uh, you just see a powder keg of not just this happening, and then you see the lack of temperament in the executive branch, and
Like,
you
oh
see
well.
not only is this a powder keg, but if the temperature of the rhetoric isn't brought down, then this is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. So I think that was my initial reaction to it.
Yeah, well, my initial reaction is just that these people, from Trump and J.D. Vance and Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi, they're all heinous pieces of shit. They really are. They're all heinous pieces of shit. And they are just branding this woman a domestic terrorist. Her mother came out and said that's just stupid. That's what she said. It's just stupid to even associate that label with her daughter. And it's just ridiculous. I've been hesitant to say for a while, because people have said abolish ICE, because I did think at some point, when it was doing what it was supposed to do, it was functioning the way that a federal law enforcement agency ought to. However, now I am in the abolish ICE camp. I think that it has to go. It is a paramilitary force. It is a group of thugs and probably masked criminals, probably insurrectionists who've been pardoned, and they need to all just be disbanded. They need to be let go. And uh, I think if and when the Democrats get power back in the House and hopefully in the Senate too, there needs to be accountability. And I think, from my point of view, in trying to game out where this goes, Shaun, you were talking about before we came on, what legal options there are. And I am in agreement with you. I don't see many because this is a federal law enforcement agency. If the state is going to try and file criminal charges, they'll stonewall it in every way possible. Um, but I also think that if Kristi Noem doesn't handle this on the PR side the way that Trump wants, I think then she's gone. There were rumblings about the fact that she was gone a few weeks ago. And I think this is the kind of situation that may put her to the test. What do you think about that?
I mean, so it depends on what your metric is or what your measurement is for doing an adequate job. Since she's pleasing an audience of one, I don't. I think she's damned if she does and damned if she doesn't, and rightly so. If you have compromised enough of your personal integrity to get to the position she's in right now, nobody should shed any tears for what happens to her in terms of loss of her position. Um, but I mean, I'm not in the camp of abolish ICE. I think a lot of uh, the policy positions of the current administration can be reversed, and I think once they are, we'll all be better for that. But to the extent that the recruitment has been at a level where you have people who may have spent way too much time in their locker in high school with their underwear wedged in their proverbial derriere, uh, obtaining these positions of authority, and to the extent that we can walk back those sort of hiring decisions, I think they're not necessarily. I think we still have to have a certain degree of immigration enforcement. I think that when you start parsing it out and even talking to the people who are supposed to enforce the law, and you ask them about the difference between US 8 USC 1321, which is the unlawful border entry, or 8 USC 1158, which is the asylum provision, and how those speak to one another, they'll give you a deer in the headlights look. So the fact that we've rolled back training so much for people who are already pretty on the precipice of being undertrained as it is, I think if you're going to scale back any of those endeavors, that you'll get them, hopefully get them back to a position where they're enforcing what is a good could be a good force, a force for good. But with respect to Noem, I think she's already telegraphed the fact that whatever investigation is either going to be, let's be honest, it's either going to be viewed as biased or it's going to be 100% biased, right?
Yeah.
And if you have a perception problem or you have a reality problem, irrespective of those two, you still have a problem. So whether or not the public perception is going to see this as being swept under the rug, or the she actually does sweep this under the rug, it's not going to change the perception. It's still going to be an asterisk with respect to that. And we were discussing before we came on about really, the immunity that the federal government enjoys in enforcing the law, and we were discussing, the level to which they can claim supremacy with respect to the federal government, and what sort of um, tools are available at the Minnesota government's behest. And you're going to end up in a question of federalism. You're going to end up with the federal government, irrespective of the conclusions of the Minnesota government, attempting to remove whatever case they would bring to the federal courts and claim some sort of immunity. So it's a whole big mess, irrespective of how it goes.
Well,
Um,
she claims that uh they have jurisdiction. Because they said they did. She said that she did not include Minnesota because they Michigan. They just simply don't have the jurisdiction. So that's her claim to it. And she got a big new beautiful hat. So I think
well,
she's figure out a lot.
we had discussed this at the beginning. I think there is right. There's procedural law, and then there's substantive law. And I think the procedural grounds with respect to the supremacy clause, she does have a leg to stand on the idea that they have some sort of exclusivity and autonomy in how they conduct themselves. How, but I mean, wrong is wrong, regardless of the procedural posture. And I think, short of a disciplinary action with the officer based upon what we've seen, whatever the administration does is going to be perceived as
Purely political. It's purely
right,
political. Yeah.
right. And I don't think they can get around that. And they put themselves in this position. So
Yes. So when they talk about how she did this to herself because she drove away, or she was there, JD Vance said before, he goes, "This is a tragedy, but she caused this tragedy." And I said, "Well, you caused this tragedy. You brought, ice into Minnesota. Um, you
They
know,
sent those thugs there. They
yeah.
sent those thugs there. And he's standing there with his mascara-laden eyes and, that smarmy look on his face, the way that he normally does, and tries to spin it and put a presentable face on thuggery and fascism, which is so gross and disgusting.
Well, they're very good at that. I was thinking of that when I was listening to her in the car driving home, how she's spinning all this, and I'm going, I'll give her that. I'll give her and like Carolyn. They're very good at kind of as you're saying something to them that's kind of showing the mirror to their face. They're very good at deflecting what what's actually happening and just causing, like deflecting where the blame should go and the point of what's going on. They're very good at that. And all I could do was I was driving, I was getting so angry how she was just dismissing what's happened. I was like, just oh shit. I was like, if I saw her in a room, I would like want to punch her lights out, Like she's ugh. Makes
We're not advocating violence here, so
no. No, no.
fuck off with your emails and messages, please. Like. So
No, like I'm driving, going, shut the fuck up. So
well, I mean, luckily you were only listening to her and you didn't have to look at
yeah,
the Mar-a-Lago face of hers.
no.
well, not to be controversial here among the two of you, I think unfortunately that's part of some of Trump's appeal is he and his administration come across with that knee-jerk emotional reaction that some of the people who derive an emotional response to this, it resonates. It seems like they're almost like the people observing this stuff in real time. And it it's sort of a double-edged sword for them, because now they're in a position of power and they have to do something.
Yeah.
And it, doing it ends up just widening the chasm that separates us. And
Messing it up. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's a totally normal emotional response to be pissed off at Carolyn Levitt, to be pissed off at Pam Bondi, and certainly to be pissed off at the malignancy that got us here. But in the grand scheme of things, I think he he doesn't have a choice but to make this a more pronounced division. And I don't think this is going to get any better.
Yeah. So that's a good point. The fact that he doesn't go, he doesn't go up there and kind of say, look, we need to, this is a tragedy. We need to see where, he, him and his people are immediately calling like the paid radical left, No, there are people who disagree with ICE being there who are out on the streets making sure that their neighbors are safe and they're being warned you know, and we've also, like, he's an idiot because if he's been to an ICE training, like many of us have, one of the things that they tell people is not to, you can't impede on if someone is,
You
if
don't
ICE,
directly engage, yeah.
yeah, you can't directly engage. You can observe, you can film, but, and that's what that woman was doing. She was watching to see what they were doing, and that's not against the law.
I think some of the difficulty in all of this, particularly with how ICE is conducting itself, is the lack of identification.
Yeah.
Right? Like one of the first and foremost things that law enforcement officers are typically trained to do is to identify yourself before you start giving authoritative commands. Then there's limited recourse to where, if you're not complying, then you get arrested for obstruction or you get arrested for disorderly conduct or something along those lines. But because of the fact that, they're in these unmarked vehicles with face masks and they're wearing body armor where the contrast in the two greens that they have that bear the legend police is largely obscured. I mean, it I think the lack of identification, certainly, I mean, there's been studies over and over and over about community policing and having a sort of oneness with the community that you're tasked with enforcing the law in. There is just a complete disconnect there, and I think that disconnect is part and parcel to how this escalates, because I don't see the administration backing down unless the governors are calling behind the scenes and saying, guys, you got to do something about this because this is untenable and it's going to explode,
We're
metaphorically
going to
speaking.
vote. We're going to vote. That's how we're going to combat this.
Yeah.
It, 2026, we need to come out in droves and show our disapproval.
Well, and they do the 1984 thing and tell us, not to believe our lying eyes when we see what's clearly in front of us. And they do this by I've for the last week I've been teaching misinformation and disinformation campaigns in my government class, and they did this over the break too with the Somali daycare fraud, supposedly, where they go to these daycare centers who don't want to open up to a bunch of strange men looking for children, not surprisingly, and then they paint the whole thing as like a fraudulent scam. They conflate it with fraud that happened 2 or 3 years ago. And Tin Walls abandons his reelection bid because of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not as well read into that particular scandal as I probably should be. But I mean, in terms of just being the master, artful, deceptive, uh, I guess, propagandist that Trump really is, I think yesterday's selective release of the video angles where he expressed, like, he pumped on his social media account the one angle where it appeared like the officer was in front of the vehicle. And that was the one that he touted as being, she was obstructive, she was this, she was that.
Ran
And
him over. He said she
right,
ran him. Yeah.
right. And you can't tell me that that guy didn't have access to all the other clips that made it, that we saw, that made it a much more damning proposition and a much more questionable shoot. You can't tell me he didn't have that beforehand. So the selectivity in what he chose not to disclose is very much on brand with how he conducts his messaging.
Yeah, and he sort of creates and constructs his own reality. I mean, the official White House website is like a walk through his mind, as terrifying as it is. It's like a haunted house.
Like the wall,
Not
like the
that
wall.
real, but even more so. The other day, January 6th, writes a completely, fictional fantasy account of the whole thing with, Mike Pence betrayed the country and Ashley Babbitt. This is somebody who they say is the victim.
And it's
They call this woman a domestic terrorist, but they call that lunatic who was going to jump through the lobby in the Capitol to hurt the Speaker of the House and the Vice President and members of Congress. They call her, this innocent victim, and it's just insane.
The tip of the spear on an angry mob.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good analogy. Very good analogy. But oh my Lord, I just looked at the blood-soaked airbag.
yeah.
I
I've
didn't see
seen.
that. That's
Yeah, I saw the picture you were talking about earlier,
yeah, the
Nancy.
video when the person came up and went, "Oh,
And actually, there was somebody there who was trying to assist her as a physician. They said, "Oh, I'm a physician," and
I
you
heard
hear
that."
that.
There was a guy
And
on a porch too, I
yeah,
saw.
well, and you hear those fucking Nazis saying, "Oh, we don't care that you're a physician."
We have our own medics. While he was saying, "Can I check her pulse? Can I approach the vehicle and check her pulse?"
And also too, one woman's account said it took some time before the actual medics came because they were blocked by ICE cars.
Yeah,
So,
and
um,
yeah, and I think, like you said, Sean, the last week has been kind of a shock and awe. I mean, we woke up this
yeah,
this whole
let's
this whole situation. I think it's deliberate because as I said in our year-end episode that Nancy and I did, Trump left 2025 much weaker than when he entered it. And because of the Epstein files, because of the economic realities that people are facing, that he has not changed at all. In fact, he's exasperated and made worse through tariffs and other ridiculous moves as it relates to the economy and just kleptocratic power grabs. But and so he left 2025 limping. And so I think what has happened today, what happened in the last few days, and then what happened in Venezuela was a show of force to project strength where there isn't any.
So I think that's part of it. And part of my genuine concern is that this is more a frantic desperation move for somebody who, for all of his superficial, um, self-serving poll watching that he does, he's very in touch with the polls. And if he has this level of desperation on January 8th, 2026, as we approach the midterms, and he sees the potentiality of losing the House, uh, the Senate, you can correct my math on this, but I think 22 of the 33 seats that are up for grabs belong to Republicans. So there
It's a
could
harder
be
map. It's a harder map in the Senate.
it's it's no it's harder in terms of the respective jurisdiction and constituency of the those that are up for grabs. But if the economy starts tracking in a downward direction, even hard math becomes a lot easier. um so if he's facing, unpopularity in droves, and he's facing a the loss of the House, if he has this level of desperation at this stage in January, just imagine what he could have when it starts reaching August and September.
good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I worry about that too, that the more desperate he gets, the more flailing he gets, the more uh extremities we're going to see, the more extreme actions we're going to see take place. George Conway, who declared his candidacy yesterday for New York 12, the Congress, said that too. He said as more the more and more that he is desperate, the more you're going to see craziness like this. Not that we don't always see craziness, but it's just going to get even worse and more intense.
What is George Conway running as?
Oh,
As a
he's
curious.
running for New York 12. He's in it's that's a crowded field of.
No, I know what he's running
Oh,
for.
Democrat,
What's his
oh,
party
he's
affiliation now?
Democrat. Yeah, he's running as a
Democrat.
Democrat. Yeah.
Because he's the chair of the Lincoln Project, isn't he? He
He
was
was one.
certainly affiliated with it.
Yeah, he was one of the founders. He was also one of the Bulwark founders. He was, he's in that kind of orbit, but he's running as a Democrat.
And that's
He's kind of my brand of Democrat, I think.
you're like a Lincoln Project Democrat. That's the district where
Jared.
JFK's grandson is running too. That's a pretty
Yeah.
direct. Yeah.
My friend Eric was
Yeah.
running for that seat, but Eric actually dropped out of that race and he's running for the state senate instead. And so because that was kind of a crowded race with, a lot of big personalities. But George Conway made the point yesterday when I heard him on the Bulwark, he was saying that he was, as more and more time goes by and Trump gets more and more desperate, as the approval ratings go down, the more extreme actions you're going to see take place both abroad and we're seeing that he loves to use the military both here and abroad to exert force. And I want to just segue into Venezuela. Just over the weekend we saw a semi-regime change, but not really because he kept the same regime in place, just chopped the head off of it by bringing him here to New York City. But they kidnapped Maduro and brought him here to Brooklyn. He's in the Brooklyn prison that Luigi and Ghislaine and Diddy were in.
Diddy. Yeah, Diddy.
Yeah, and so he's in,
Epstein when he was
yeah. Well, Epstein was in Manhattan actually, but
oh,
yeah,
someone mentioned
Ghislaine.
there.
Yeah, no, Ghislaine was in that one. Ghislaine was there, Diddy was there, Luigi was there. So it's kind of like the who's who of, awful criminals. And so Maduro is now in that prison, and uh, Trump is actually, George Bush when he invaded Iraq and, was selling this fantasy about sprinkling freedom dust in the Middle East and all that. Trump's not even putting on airs about that. He's just like, we want the oil.
Well, he's
Yeah,
very clear about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He keeps saying that, well, Jon Stewart did a really funny bit about, just keep cutting to like every time someone wanted to give him an out, like Lindsey Graham, he's like, no, and we want the oil. He's, I have to say that about Trump. He, he can't hide what he's really thinking. You know what I mean? He's there for the oil. He's not there for the drugs. He's not there for democracy. He's there for the oil. And he needed to bring gas prices down, and this is how he's going to do it. This is how he's
yep.
going to do it.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I certainly think that's part of it. I mean, I fancy myself as a constitutionalist, and I know, from conservative angles, I mean, the actual constitutionalist, like the kind of person who read the thing for more than just license to say whatever the hell you want.
yeah,
And the thing that I mean, in 2001, we had the authorization of use of military force. In 2002, after that sales pitch from Colin Powell, we had the Iraq War authorization of use of military force, right? Um, when you're talking about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution and the use of military force outside of the War Powers Act of 1973, you're talking about congressional involvement at its basic core. Whether or not you're talking about the lead from behind movement in Libya, where you're talking about UN Security Council resolutions that were authorized by Congress in treaties, you're talking about something that tethers it to either a delegation of power from the Congress or some authorization, some direct or some indirect through treaty. Here, he had nothing. Like, there's nothing that he can point to say, oh, this is constitutional. I think, and you were mentioning prior to coming in, Andrew, that they had the Monroe Doctrine, and there's nothing that says I have a real solid footing than citing a 200-year-old doctrine as opposed to any concrete authorization or delegation given by Congress. So, from my vantage point, as somebody who studies the Constitution, that's my central issue: is what in the world authorized
Well,
you to do this?
so today I want to look it on my phone because the Senate actually, and with some Republican Senate support, they were drawing up a war powers act for this if there is going to be military on the ground because he has 60 days. If he does a military action, he has 60 days to um, ask Congress for some sort of. So technically, I think he's still in the realm of in our Constitution. There are, the UN is having a whole different say, but that's international law. That's
But
a different realm.
that's the War Powers Act. So even with that, there's a narrow requirement that you have to demonstrate some sort of articulable threat to the country. And how do you go ahead and do that in the context of of the drug crimes that he was facing, particularly in the month after you pardon Juan Hernandez from what was it? Was it
Honduras.
Honduras?
Yeah.
Honduras, yeah,
Right, and he was accused, not accused. So we're not talking the indictment phase. We're
convicted.
talking he was convicted
Hmm.
of what was it, 400 tons of trafficking in cocaine into the United States. So how do you go from that in December to in January on an indictment using the military to go in to the sovereign territory of another country to topple a dictator,
Well,
whether or not you agree with the election or not, which
well,
is the height of irony.
here's the funny thing. You and I and Andrew are all sitting here talking about the legalities of where he should be, the Constitution, but nobody's holding him to it. So I always tell my students when I teach the Constitution, I said, if you run a red light and the police officer doesn't pull you over and give you a ticket, do you still break the law? And a few kids were like, I don't know. I go, yes, you still broke the law. It's just a matter of you haven't been enforced. And so Donald Trump is just doing what he wants. And until we hold him accountable, he still thinks he can do what he wants. Like like somebody interviewed him from the Times today about kind of where he feels he has this right in the global world. And he just feels he could do whatever he wants. This is his train set and he can move the pieces around where he wants. So unless Congress changes its, majority, um, there I did see some cracks today. Like I said, Josh Hawley was mentioning that, there are certain things, all right, Congress has to come in now if we're going to have boots on the ground in Venezuela. So it looks like some Republicans are going to say, all right, we need to come in on this too. We'll see. But right
Well,
now, he's doing what he wants.
well,
Nobody's holding him to it.
Right.
they also, if Congress wants to assert its authority on this, they need a veto-proof majority, and they don't have that. They
Right.
have they had a majority enough to pass through the Senate, but they don't have enough where he's inevitably going to veto something like that. And they need to just have the veto-proof majority. But I was told this would be the peace presidency. And Stephen Miller, I remember saying that Kamala Harris would have your children and your sons off at war if she were to win. And that's how he defeated the Bush era Republicans in the 2016 primary by throwing Iraq in their face
Well,
and talking about that. And so I thought we were going to be, the peace president.
we're not. You
Yeah,
know,
that's,
we're
oh, I know. I'm
fine.
just,
Change the
I know. I'm being facetious. But I
It's your
thought,
birthday, you can.
yes, I can. And so I can. Not that I need an excuse, but I thought this was going to be, the peace president. I remember when JD Vance was announced as the VP that it was the peace ticket. And that we would not have any regime change at all. And really, what did he actually change? He kept the vice president in charge of Venezuela, and the actual leader of the opposition, Machado, the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize instead of Trump, was
They're not
that.
considering her. They're
Yeah,
not.
and her party was actually the actual winner of the last election they had,
But
and.
All right,
They
so I got to
didn't
ask you a
even,
question. I got to ask you a
yeah.
question. I just want to. So when he said on the air that she didn't have the support to be put in charge, nobody called him on that. Like, he- I don't get that. So with reporters, like, why didn't someone call him on that? Well, she did win the election. How is that that she doesn't have the support? He doesn't want her in there because she won the Nobel Prize and he didn't. Like, that's what a baby this man is.
Well, exactly. And
So,
she actually even offered to give him the prize as if that mattered. It reminded me of the Golden Girls when Rose won, accepted the charity prize on behalf of her dead friend. And, and she was like, well, I'm going to get that dead woman's name off and put mine.
well, yeah. Do you know
I
what I
will
mean?
say that part of his petulant, narcissistic, petty behavior may be part of our saving grace because he really does not have the capability or the self-restraint to do anything other than what is in his immediate knee-jerk sort of reactionary. There's no impulse control with this guy at all. So I think, could you imagine if
How does
he
that
was?
help us?
Could you
Because he's
imagine if he was more tempered and more restrained and a bit more calculating in any of his day to day?
Oh, God, no.
because inevitably, even though it does cause chaos, he's a bull in a china shop, but he's also a very stupid one.
Right.
He's also an inept one. He's also just, clumsy and cloddish at almost everything he does. And so I think this issue in Venezuela is no different. I think, I see people posting videos of people celebrating in Venezuela that Maduro was gone. I remember the statue of Saddam Hussein coming down too in Iraq. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and that seemed like a victory party until ISIS filled the void.
Right.
Until like, other extremist groups filled the
Well,
void,
there's
until
some
more of our soldiers got killed.
Yeah, there's that euphoria. But I was listening that there are now issues because people who are celebrating Maduro's oust, there are the government that's still in place have threatened people that said if you don't support still the regime, there are thugs that are going out on the streets. And so things are beginning to happen um where there's this kind of fighting. So there's some problems starting, of course. I mean, they had problems to begin with. So it was a lot of places were violent. So the people in the streets dancing are in Miami. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well,
and we all who did not, nobody really liked Maduro. Like
no,
so,
he was a horrible guy, but
and
again,
he stole the election. So
yeah.
that's the other thing too. So
Well, that was something else Trump cited on Air Force One as a reason he had to go. I was like, oh, really? That's something we care about now. Okay. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. But
Ironic.
I I think that, in regards to with this oil, uh, so this is what irks me sometimes. All right, you went in, you took out Maduro. Obviously, it was not because of drugs, blah, blah, blah. For the oil, his oil, look, Venezuela has a tremendous amount of oil, re regardless of the circumstances as to why, because there's a lot of history where that country has been fucked. So, but if he's honestly going to go in and make the oil companies better and make it more better for the people of Venezuela, I'm all for that, okay? Help them out, get the country going, and give a little kickback to the US for putting you back in shape. But he's not going to do that. This is all about for us, like for him.
well, and he's extending his Donroe Doctrine ambitions to other places too. He's talking about Cuba being next. He's talking about
Don't go after. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
so mad at
he's talking about Colombia. He's back on his Greenland kick, and so
him.
he's this is sort of his version of Lebensraum.
Yeah, Denmark's laughing. They're like, we're not for sale. Like,
Oh yeah, well, like I call it Lebensdom, like like because that was
united, yeah, like out. But I feel so bad for Cuba right now because they did rely on Venezuela, uh, because of our embargo, I've been to Cuba. And the Cuban people are wonderful, and what we're doing to them is horrendous. And is it because they have a government that we don't work well with? So we have an embargo which prevents them from getting a lot of necessity in trade. Um, and when Obama was president, he opened up a lot of possibilities. And Cuban people were saying to me, um, how things were beginning to happen when Obama was president. In fact, every word out of their mouth was when Obama was president, when Obama was president, and then it stopped when Trump became president. And Biden didn't do anything either. So why can't we just have some decent diplomacy with Cuba? Why do we have to just uproot the whole thing? They've been living under that system for a very long time. Um, become better neighbors, and then let's see then start seeing if they want to change governments or something like. Let the Cuban people decide that.
Well, I think the person that's behind this is little Marco.
Yeah, well, he can't wait to, because he's promised probably all his Miami friends that he's going to go, uproot Cuba.
well, he's also behind what's going on in Venezuela too. Him standing in the corner in that Vanity Fair piece, contemplating which Latin American country he wants to upend. Uh, so, what do you think about that, Shaun? Do you think that Rubio is the mastermind here, or is it something else?
I think really, I first off, I don't think Trump has the capacity to relinquish any sort of everything has got to be his idea. And I think with respect to Venezuela, uh, I think part of it that may be another saving grace is his short attention span. I don't think he really has the attention span to nation build. Um, and is this just a quick hit? We're done, and let them sort of take over as to ruling their country in an autonomous fashion. I mean, all of his posturing and bluster about we're going to run it, we're going to uh, use our oil companies to rebuild the infrastructure. I don't know that he really has the attention span and wherewithal to do that. I think he is, if you can say one positive thing about Trump, it's that he definitely knows how to get an audience and maintain an audience. And I think part of it is what he did with the American media and how he sort of used his shocking rhetoric to sort of captivate and dictate the audience. So I think once that sort of euphoria dies out and the uh, the people ultimately grow wary of having to stay in there for a prolonged period of time, he'll likely come off that just as quickly.
Yeah, you said that he commands an audience. He's like, if P.T. Barnum were a sociopath. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I
Really
mean,
doesn't have that. But what sucks is, all right, he doesn't have the attention span. I totally agree with that analogy. But who's going to suffer? It's going to be, the Venezuelans. And if one of his goals was to get many of the Venezuelans to go back home, they're not gonna. If, things aren't,
Well,
you know,
stable,
and
safe.
if enough instability is caused, you might even create more migrants.
Definitely.
right?
So, definitely. So, um, I- we'll see. I mean, that was only like a couple of days ago.
I know.
So
Well, every story in the news cycle feels like it's 10 years apart, even though it was 2 days ago. Like,
I'm
But
exhausted.
that also perpetuates him remaining in the news and in the headlines and the first and foremost of everything is I was reading something not overly long ago that the average attention span right now is 47 seconds.
that
Oh,
long?
can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
House Resolution 1834, which was to extend the healthcare subsidies.
Subsidies.
Guess who didn't vote for it? One of the
Oh,
Republicans that didn't.
Maliotakis.
Meliotakis. Yeah.
Talkis, she was a nay. So, Lauer, voted for it. He was a yay.
Yes.
Him and there was another person from the New York area, but Republican.
17 Republicans
Yeah,
voted with the
17.
Democrats.
But
Yeah.
Nicole, because I looked it up and I looked to see how she voted, and it was a no. The
She's
reason why I said that now is it just came back up on the television screen. So I was like, yep,
Well, if they take over Cuba, he'll give her the royal governess title or something. I don't
that's
know.
right. She has a Cuban family. So
Maybe he'll give her like the royal governess title.
she to
Maybe
me is like the biggest paradox. Her and she's like one of the biggest paradoxes for me is that you have the Trump, I guess, base, which is we don't like career politicians and we don't like you know uh, people who are focus group to the hill, and we don't like uh politicians who do nothing. And she's all of those things. Like, if you had spoken, I mean, you knew that Andrew Morris and I were friends, and I was working on her campaign, and
yeah.
I really wanted to see her elected. And one of the things that sort of drove me nuts about her, not only Atakis, is she is. If you could construct a career politician in a lab, it would be her.
yeah.
No, none of her supporters could mention anything that she had done either in the legislature, in the assembly, or in her career as as congresswoman. Any legislative accomplishment that
He'll
she'd
get you
done,
a
any
flag.
initiative that she had taken. And the only thing she was famous for that I could think of was the failed bid for mayor, obviously just looking for the next political come up. So
Well,
how there's and she doesn't tell it like it is. She walked back her. She was very critical of Trump initially, only to kiss the ring.
Yes.
So like she doesn't stand for anything. To me, I just don't understand Staten Island's love for her.
well, I don't think Staten Island has love for her. I think if Donald Trump were to send a nasty tweet about her, she'd be done. And I think she knows that, and I think that's why she uh, just does what she does as far
It,
as supporting him is
it
Call
concerned.
reminds
her
me,
office tomorrow. Ask her why she was a nay to extend healthcare subsidies.
Well,
yeah.
if
It,
it's the good and right and moral and just thing to do, you could rely on her to do the opposite. And you will, and I would disagree Sean, when you said that she hasn't done anything. There's not a ribbon that's safe in this town while she's Congresswoman. She's got every ribbon.
but seriously, I mean, other than her social media presence, what has she done? What it like? There was. Did you ever see the movie Office Space?
She
Yes,
helped
I love Office
helped
Space.
my
Right,
my
where
aunt's sister-in-law to get like some check that she was missing. That's
I mean,
it.
constituent relations, sure, but you're
Yeah.
given a budget for that, and everybody's job is to really go through their constituents and help them out with funding and help them out with their relationship to the federal government. That's a given and a foregone conclusion in any jurisdiction. But it reminds me of that Office Space scene where you remember the Bobs are having that meeting, and one of them is like, "So what is it you say you do here?" And that's all I can think about when I see her. She's very present on social media,
Yeah.
but in terms of actual governance, does anybody know anything that she's really done?
She got some sort of Greek something with she passed some sort of economic trade thing with the Greeks.
Well, I can tell you what she's done. She's cut healthcare. She's cut healthcare. She's done it today. She voted for the terrible bill last year. Her time, she voted to decertify a free and fair election in 2 states.
Yes, she did.
She has voted against LGBT equality, where, people who live in glass closets ought not to throw stones, Nicole.
Mhm.
And so I think that, everything she's done has been destructive. Everything that she's done has been against the interest of her constituents. And my hope is that, there was an article that she posted actually about the lawsuit that is challenging the boundaries of her district. And we might actually share, if we get our way, we might actually share with the Lower East Side, which, okay. I'm having okay.
So what did she have to say about Texas?
Oh, she at the time she said, well, nobody should do gerrymandering, but of course she focused it on what Gavin was doing in California, not what was happening in Texas.
Oh, okay. So
And
just
she brought up how her district was supposedly, because we had changed it and then they won. The Republicans sued and won, and then and so they had to go back to the districting um, that was more favorable to the Republicans here. But it's okay for for Texas.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you're not a fan of gerrymandering, and I can certainly understand
I am not a fan.
when you're talking about districts that look like the lines are drawn with deflated clown balloons,
Yeah.
like I can understand. Like if there was a universal across the board legislative effort to draw the lines in a manner that's symmetrical, I think that'd be fantastic. But if you're going to say one, do it for the other.
Yeah, and well, I think, as she will come down on whatever side of any issue that she thinks her bread is buttered on. And I think in the MAGA Civil War that's been
Yeah, go to
happening.
that. So we
Yeah.
should go to that.
Yeah, the MAGA Civil War, I think she's definitely, Erica Kirk endorsed JD Vance for president already in 2028. And I think
Well, because
she
she's going to be the first lady.
Oh yeah, well, as soon as he dumps poor Usha, then she wants to be the first lady. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, the way that they touch each other when they're out in public, the way that they hug and they hold it just a little longer than,
I
what's
don't think he's
normal.
afraid of divorce. I mean, look at the Trumps. So,
No, I know, but I think, he's the only person who I legitimately feel bad for in this whole saga is
yeah.
Usha Vance, because he takes every opportunity just to humiliate that woman. He goes on stage and says that he would prefer her to convert to Christianity.
Christianity, I saw that.
Yeah, he says, and just just say, and you could just tell she's like cringing over everything he says, and just, but he wants the princess, he wants the game, he wants the princess of Turning Point, Erica Kirk, who is grieving with pyrotechnics. Um,
I don't think there's anybody more ideologically malleable than JD Vance, who was in the Trump is Hitler camp before he wasn't.
Yep.
yeah. And he was the headliner at the Turning Point USA conference, where a lot of the MAGA divisions were on full display, and you could see what a fragile coalition it is because without Trump, and Trump is the central figure of the MAGA coalition, and without Trump, the entire thing fractures. You have the Tucker Carlson, whose son actually works for JD. Uh, you have him, the Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Steve Bannon on one side, and then you have Erica Kirk and Ben Shapiro and the more establishment types on the other. And JD Vance, when he spoke, did not condemn Nick Fuentes, did not condemn the white supremacists. And why would he? Because he needs those people to win. And so I just, as somebody who was a former Republican yourself and uh, sees the way that this has gone over the past decade or so, what do you make of how fragile the MAGA coalition is?
Well, firstly, if I had my finger on the pulse of the current Republican, uh, I guess the current Republican Party, I would still be in it. I those factions are pretty much unrecognizable. My understanding from when I had I would have fancied myself as a more socially liberal, like libertarian um, sect of the Republican Party, and a bit more fiscally conservative uh, at when I was in the Republican Party. So the George Conway brand of Democrat is more along my speed. Um, so it's difficult to say, like the Fuentes. I have no idea. Something like that would have been shunned before. The fact that it's, well, he's interesting too, because to me, how do you espouse white supremacy talking points when your dad was Mexican? I don't understand that.
Well,
It's
yeah.
white supremacists. You don't have to be all white meat.
I mean,
So
it reminds, but to a
look
certain
at the
extent, it
Proud Boys.
reminds,
Proud Boys, the leader is Hispanic.
but that paradox in and of itself, it just reminds me of there was a Chappelle show spoof, um,
Yeah.
Clayton Bigsby,
Yes. I
and it
know. I love
reminds me
it.
of that. Like,
Yeah.
how do you have credibility to stand up there and even say this? It's just weird to me. It's strange, and I think for his vantage point, that would be something that he took more umbrage with as an insult than anything else. But I think just the fact that he's allowed in the same, I remember prior candidates would be backed by like David Duke, and they'd be like, "No, nah, I don't want his support."
They would totally renounce it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And now not only do you have a seat within, but you have a table. Like, it's just to me bizarre. Um, and then these are the same people who will never cease to remind you that the Democrats were the party of the KKK,
Well,
right? Like,
we've had a
that's
seat at the table for, not we, I mean me, but white supremacy has had a seat at the table. You know, sometimes the table was behind the curtain, but it was still pulling the levers. But now with Trump, it's, hey,
Right out in the open,
yeah,
which is why I was like, when people like Ben Shapiro and whoever else was up there, proselytizing about letting anti-Semites at the table, I was like, oh, I'm surprised to learn that's an issue we suddenly care about in this party, because you had not long ago, about almost a decade ago, you had people cheering "Jews will not replace us" in Charlottesville with the tiki torches, and the president saying they were very fine people.
very
And
fine people on both sides. Very
yeah,
fine people on both sides. That I can
mhm,
tell you, believe me.
hmm.
yep.
And so
So,
I was surprised to learn that anti-Semitism, having welcoming anti-Semites was a point of controversy in this Republican Party. It's really fascinating to learn that, given their own history and who they've chosen as the leader of their party over the last decade.
Well, I should be paying attention more to the rift between that, because that to me is fascinating in the sense that, like, I listen to it to the extent that there is a talking head on the right that I think has at least maintained enough intellectual consistency for me to sort of observe as necessarily a reasonable figure, but certainly one who's more versed in arguing and being able to articulate their positions. It's Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Like, I think when, particularly because I mean he's a Harvard educated lawyer, so he speaks to the logical rationale. He might not do it to my liking, but if you're going to get a coherent response as to where the Republican Party lies, it would be Ben Shapiro. In terms of Tucker Carlson, I would have never paid attention to him. I thought he was a joke. Um,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's got a pretty powerful platform. And I mean, Candace Owens, like, I don't know if she's even still in, the politics game anymore, because she's been on the hunt for Charlie Kirk's actual murderer since it happened. And basically her theory over time is, I'm just summarizing it here, but basically, Israel killed Charlie Kirk. That's basically what she's hinting at. And and so there's a part of that base that believes that sort of thing and is very conspiratorial. And that's ultimately part of the mainstream now. And I don't know how you put that craziness back in the bottle, if you do, even at all.
I mean, I'm curious to know, because certainly I've seen this among my friends. There were a lot of them that were banging the drum, similar to the Candace Owens conspiracists, sort of, that there was some Epstein list, like he had kept in his diary my fellow pedophile list, and I never really thought that. I thought there was more comprehensive. evidence, and the amount of surveillance that went on for such an extended period of time, I thought there's no way that there's not a robust file on this guy that implicates other people. But I never thought that there was a list. But these people thought that Bill Clinton was hiding it and that somehow Hillary Clinton had secured the keys to the Bureau of Prisons from Donald Trump and went in and, did her
Let
thing.
everybody, yes.
Yeah, so I think that the knee jerk reaction for me when I saw the poll numbers slipping was maybe he's peeling off. Maybe some are peeling off on account of having banged this drum for so long of this Epstein list being just the central way to stick it to the deep state. Now realizing, wait a second, I spent the last 10 years advocating and screaming this at the top of my lungs only to find out the moron Messiah is in it. So how do I
Yeah.
reckon?
The call's coming from inside the house, and I
Right.
think, yeah, I think that's what sort of
Well,
led
that
people.
Marjorie, like,
Yeah,
she's leaving. She left. She's
yeah,
gone. Her
yeah.
last day was the other day. You
But
know,
I have a tendency to believe that that's probably lower numbers than what you would anticipate. The people who have really bought the cool, they got the merch, they got the hats, they got their signed Bibles, aren't going to suddenly wake up and have that moment of lucid introspection and say, you know what, everything I've been sold is a lie, and I realize that now. Um, so I think the Marjorie Taylor Greens are probably less so. And your your point about the rift between Fuentes and like your Ben Shapiro's, that's interesting and something I'll have to pay more attention to.
Well, and I think the Republicans in Congress and across the country are sensing the fragility and the weakness of the coalition because you have people like Marjorie leaving, at least Stefanik leaving. You have
By the way, that's my home district. Well,
oh,
where I
okay.
was raised. That's
Oh,
she
okay.
is.
Well, we would miss you here on Staten Island, but maybe go and run now that
Yeah.
she's now go and run for it now that she's not.
No, I couldn't do that. I no, I'm pretty happy with my roots in Staten Island now. I've been
Yeah.
here for
Well,
for
I was going
13
to say
years.
before about the Ben Shapiro and, the Nick Fuentes is, I heard that, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled with Charlie Kirk being gone. And so someone's trying to fill that kind of vacuum and who's going to be, the next like shock jock kind of, that's going
For
to,
Ben Shapiro?
well, no, I mean like with Nick Fuentes and,
Oh,
not been,
Charlie
like,
Kirk, because Charlie Kirk is gone, and like who's gonna fill that? Like he was sort
right.
of
So
the
like
well,
Nick Fuentes and, what's his, why am I forgetting his name now? Uh,
Tucker Carlson.
thank you. I keep having Harrison Ford in my head. I know.
Harrison Ford. Don't insult our
No, I
Harrison
know it's
Ford
not
like that.
Harrison Ford, but that was blocking. That was the name that was blocking. Yes, Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and people like that. Like,
I think, well, in large respects, Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson predate Charlie Kirk in notoriety. And I think
but
you're,
they all have social media. They all have podcasts now and stuff.
yeah, it's weird.
And like they have like Megan, like you can buy tickets to her show. Like come buy tickets to my
I'm
show.
I'm reasonably impressed that Tucker Carlson has a career at all after costing his last employer close to $787 million.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if you're going freelance, that's the way to do it. But I can't see anybody who's been established in any capacity stepping up and filling the role of a Charlie Kirk. Um, so it would have to be somebody I think that's lesser known that sort of makes that rise, that weird rise to circulate among, you know,
Our well,
intellectually vulnerable freshman college students
And
to,
well,
gaining the admiration and love of bitter incels.
by
well, my
selectively editing anytime you're crucified.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I posted something on my Instagram stories. Someone, Joe Rogan, who uh, made showed this chart about the in regards to, oh, what was the statistic? It was crime and not crime.
Was it a correct statistic from Joe Rogan?
No,
Yeah.
but it was not a correct. All right, so the point that I made here was he was using this data to make a point. And if you looked at the data, you were like, "Oh, okay. Oh, all right, that there you go." But if the person went and researched where that graph came from, and it was like from several years ago, so you couldn't credit the Trump administration for that data. It was under, a different time period.
Wasn't that Pam Bondi who did that?
She
Who
probably could have
abruptly
did
put
that as well.
she
Well,
posted it and abruptly took it down when she realized the dates didn't match up?
I'm sure she did. But this is what's happening is that people are pulling like they remind me of my students, like, when they have a report due, they just grab at any chart just to have some picture on their Google slide. And like, where did that come from? I don't know, so
It came from confirmation bias in a Google search.
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely where it came from. But I noticed the fragility of the coalition is not gone unnoticed by elected Republicans. A lot of Senate Republicans like Marsha Blackburn and potentially Lisa Murkowski may want to leave the Senate to run for governor of their state. There are a lot of House Republicans who are taking early retirements. Elise Stefanik to me was the most surprising. And so do you think that that is a sense that like once Trump is out of the picture, they are trying to chart their own course in a world without him?
I think personally, I think there is no world without him. I think um, I think whatever coalition is there, they're not going to galvanize around JD Vance. Um, I think
Yeah.
part of the appeal of Trump that I've been trying to understand for years, because I keep using the phrase paradox, and he embodies it, right? Like one of the things that I'd heard, he's not a career politician. He tells it like it is. Yeah, the guy with 34 felonies for document falsification and uh, an adjudication for fraud and a defamation jury finding
And
tells it like it is.
30,000 documented lies from his first administration.
Exactly. And that's before they stopped counting, I think. Because
Yeah.
after a period of time, I think that the media was just like, at this point, it's just every time air passes over his vocal cords. Let's just chalk it up to that.
Yeah.
But I think that appeal, and it took me a long time to figure it out. I had told you I have rural roots, and a lot of those rural roots, the paradox is, how do you, who, have this sort of resentment towards this city, choose as your champion of the lower middle class a billionaire trust fund baby from Manhattan? Like, how do you square that circle? And I think part of it is that impulsivity control thing, because there's in that you see some genuineness, right? Like my degree was in political science, so I studied history. I studied history, philosophy, and then the practical application of that ends up being you get into the real world and you're engaging in manipulation through focus groups to try and either influence donors or influence voters, right? So those sort of focus groups, disingenuous, like the Nicole Maliotakis of I'll change whatever my position is to the way the political winds blow. You're now seeing a Donald Trump who really does not give a shit other than his immediate like needs, wants, and desires. And
Yeah.
that comes across as being honest.
Yeah. Well,
And then you hitch your horse to that wagon and
yeah.
have to invest so much in defending it, right? And you had said earlier whether or not there's fatigue, right? Part of it, sure, there's going to be fatigue, but you've invested so much at this point. Do you just turn a tuck tail and run? No, you go down with the ship. There's not anybody in the Republican Party right now who can captivate that sort of audience. Your JD Vance is vulnerable because he's, I think, the only elected representative to actually analogize the current president to Adolf Hitler.
Well, and he's also has the charisma of a doorknob. I mean, he's just totally uncaptivating at all, and he's just so smarmy, and he's just got this look like a, you know, he's got this like look of, his lips are always pursed. He's just ugh.
Well, I
Um,
heard the couch found him charismatic. Um,
well, yeah, the couch
Maybe
certainly.
he's getting a Mar-a-Lago face soon. Who knows?
Maybe, and I think Erica Kirk has, had some of his charisma behind the scenes too. Um, and yeah, that's what I think too. And just to go
I
to
love
your
him
point,
on South Park.
yeah. Well, just to
Hey,
get
boss.
just to get to Sean's point about Maggie Haberman said that too. She said that she had to call Trump for a story. I read her book Confidence Man, and she had to call Trump for a story. And she pointed out an inconsistency, and he said, "Well, what do you want me to say?" And she took that as, "What do you want me to say to like get out of this to, you know, satisfy whatever it is you're looking for?"
I actually appreciate her commentary. It is very even keeled. And if you're talking about a journalist that just gives you the who, what, when,
Oh,
where,
she's
and
excellent.
allows the how and why to be your.
Yeah.
I actually appreciate her journalistic
Yeah.
approach.
I was like, during the first term, I followed her Twitter feed obsessively. I was like, Maggie, give me some good news. Come on. Come on.
I'll tell you, two guys that really I pay attention to. I told you I paid attention to Ben Shapiro in terms of giving as close to a lucid conservative bend on things, I guess, as one can get when you're dealing with like logicless logic. But the two guys that I pay attention to the most now are, I call them the logic bros. One is Dean Withers, and the other, I don't know if you've heard of him. Dean Withers, and the other is called Parker Get a Job.
No, I've never heard of him. I
So,
know Dean. I know Dean Withers. I know Dean
yeah, I've
Withers.
heard of Dean Withers.
Dean Withers
Parker,
always
get
has
a job.
Parker.
Is that a serious name? Parker,
No,
get
I
a
think
job.
it's sort of a pseudonym. He goes by Parker, but I think it's a pseudonym that sort of, because they're very young, both of them, and they're constantly together. But I've listened to some of their podcasts, but a lot of the contrast that I saw, that I sort of was like, you know what, let's approach this. I know we're off topic here, but let's see how they approach this. Was watching them and Jubilee against Charlie Kirk. They actually, those are the things that Charlie Kirk would never post on his feed.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I remember Dean Withers, I think, got the better of him in many of their discussions. And you would never see that. And, he's of course canonized and sainted and all that stuff on the right.
Parker had an interesting argument toward Kirk with respect to his aversion to DEI. And he was like, what is the Senate if not DEI? What
Yeah.
is the
Oh,
Senate if not DEI? Because now you're essentially giving a disparate power to rural entities not based upon population. So it's not based upon merit, it's based upon just an arbitrary quantity. And it was a fascinating argument, but
Well, then
anyway,
the Electoral College, I always said, is DEI for the red states. Like it is. That's
yeah,
always what I said. The Electoral College is DEI for the red states. But in any case, Shaun, it was so good to have you on. Thank you
it's
so much.
always a pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
yes,
I
thanks for
love
coming on.
nothing better than civilized discourse. One thing I would like you guys to do is get somebody who really disagrees on. So like your nastiest email, see if they'll come on the show.
Yeah, well, maybe
Yeah, I could definitely find. I could
you have plenty
definitely
of
find.
cantankerous boomer rubes to choose from.
You know, I have a, I was listening to something that Scott was posting, and now I don't listen to him anymore. But today he was like said something, so I was like, all right, I'll listen to it for a few minutes, and he made a very interesting point. He was because he's a he arrives at he's a protester, blah blah blah,
Well, a broken clock.
so but he always says that and he has a point. He goes, when you do free speech, there's a line, and when you cross that line, you break the law, and you're in a different territory. So when a police officer, goes to arrest you, he goes, I always, I get arrested. He goes, I don't fight it, I don't run, I don't, and I was like, I agree with him in that aspect because when you're at a protest, when like so for example, I always tell students like if you're at a protest and you decide to block the street and you don't have a permit to block the street, then you put yourself in jeopardy of being arrested. Um, and so I was like starting to listen. I'm going, oh my God, I'm actually starting to agree with him a little bit. And then he goes off on, uh,
Whatever the fun. Yeah,
then he
whatever.
takes this turn. I'm like, all right, you lost me.
Yeah.
Like the liberal scum, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but the liberal. And I was like, for a moment there, I thought maybe we could have a little, um, but no, not anymore. He's gone there.
Yeah. Civilized discourse happens to be a dying.
But I listen to Dan Abrams a lot. I always talk about him on here. I
Oh
listen to
yeah.
him on the way home. If you POTUS politics, I always find a lot of moderate middle ground discussion, and sometimes on there's some conservative talk that's a little too much for me, but because it's on that station. But I always find he's pretty good, even keeled. He's very kind of facts, the law. He kind of really kind of more addresses what the law is. Um, and I like him in regards to, you know, getting just some, like you talk about Maggie,
Haberman.
like he's like my Maggie, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have a few. Well, of course, I have Rachel Maddow. I have Kara Swisher, Scott Galloway. I love the I've had it women, uh, Jennifer Welch and Angie, and they're a good duo too. They're hilarious. They're these Southern women, and I like something about
I've listened
hearing.
to them. Yeah, no, I don't know.
I Something about hearing a Southern accent curse a lot
I
makes
think
me
we're all
die
like,
laughing.
I always love the boys from the Obama camp. I love the
They're too broy for me. I
no,
just
but I actually like listening to their podcast. And Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart, could be God for all I know.
He was
yeah.
my, you know what, of the civil discourse conversations that I discussed, the ones that most resonated with me when I was coming up through my political science uh, education was Jon Stewart. Whenever he would have John McCain on, there seemed to be like a genuine friendship between the two of them,
I
and it
believe
was
that.
and
Yeah.
it was like a spirited sort of but I really appreciated every time he was on that show. I felt like I learned more through seeing the contrast, but also not in a way of personal animus, just sort of a genuine discussion topic among two people who had a mutual respect for one another. And I feel like those sort of conversations are how we get through this.
Yeah,
Yes, definitely. I
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love him. I used to use him all the time when I worked at art and design, where the students at art and design were definitely a lot more liberal, but also a little bit more worldly in regards to you could joke a little bit more. They understood he was very good at helping me teach government. I used a lot of him. One day we live tweeted, I was talking about like teaching participation, and we talked about the Zagruda bill that they were trying to pass, and John Stewart was on the floor, and all the kids were tweeting the different congressional and asking them to pass the Zagruda bill, and we were watching it live. It was great. It was, love
Yeah,
John.
his advocacy is amazing too. I really have a Jon Stewart, of all the people that I could sit down and have dinner with. I would love to just because one, he's seen so much. Two, he was Armed Forces Network had him on. So even when I was overseas, I was able to use him as sort of a comedic way to stay in touch with,
And also
the
lighten it
the
up,
current events.
because it could get so heavy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you, Shaun, for coming on. This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage,
I'm Nancy Richards,
and we'll see
and
you
thank
next
you,
week.
Shaun.
We'll,
Thank you both for having me, and happy birthday, Andrew.
thank
Yes,
you.
happy birthday.